There's been a lot of debate about the new Premier League laws of the game this season, but the one that has everybody up in arms most is that Arsenal must lose at least one player to injury every match. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Yeah, that's right. A lot of new rules about getting cards for waving imaginary cards and for time wasting. But the one that I think has us most outraged is this one that says Arsenal must lose at least one player during or between every match we play. I'm not sure if it's a rule, but it feels like a rule. Leandro Trossard picking up an injury just before this match. I think Thomas Partey injury was in training just before the match. Was it the United match, actually, I think, causing plans to change, lineups to shift. And then, of course, Declan Rice getting injured in the middle of this match. Bukayo Saka potentially injured as well, though no news on that, and hopefully no news is good news. It's been a bit of that kind of a start to the season. We remain unbeaten, which is good. But I don't think too many people are feeling fantastic coming out of the derby. And it's a shame because I think more than anything, it just felt like a very poor, sloppy game overall. And I don't think that's what we had in mind coming off the riotous Champions League victory in midweek, although perhaps playing an emotionally intense return to the Champions League in midweek was a factor in how the game finished. So, a lot to chew on there. These are the hardest ones sometimes. The thing that's difficult, when we play great and everybody just brags about how good we are, that's an easy one. When we get slaughtered and everybody's furious equally, that's an easy one. Games like this where you don't lose, but you don't play great. There's some performances that weren't good. People see it differently. Some people see the positives. Some people see the negatives. These are the hard ones to break down. And I think, we'll do our best to try to, figure out where it didn't go to plan and where it could have gone to plan better and what we do going forward now, because obviously the squad is looking a little ragged given the number of players that are out. So here to try to thread that needle with me on a very strange derby days. Tim, you can find him on Twitter at Stillminator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And Clive, you can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Let's get into it. Just first things first, Clive. Trossard injured the night before the game. The news started to circulate, and it gave Mikel a selection headache, obviously. It's not the injuries that hurt you. We have a very, very deep squad. We've been saying it all season, but it is the cluster injuries. Last season, it wasn't just losing Saliba. It was losing Saliba and losing Tomiyasu. We have seen injuries of this sort be a problem. It's not just losing Martinelli. It's losing Martinelli and Trossard. And it's not just losing Thomas Partey. It's losing Thomas Partey and ultimately Declan Rice. But I get that creates a problem. My feeling has always been that when you have injuries that put you in a position you don't want to be in, keep the maximum number of influential players in their influential position. And what I mean by that is essentially, if you look at our attack this season, I don't think it's been great. I think it has clicked in a few scenarios, but the times it has looked best to me are the times Jesus has been on the pitch at center forward. So I expected we'd see Jesus at center forward and Reece Nelson, the guy who just got a shiny new contract, play on the left wing. That's not what we saw. Vieira starts. Jesus plays out left. Don't think he's ever played there for us. And it was Eddie Nketiah through the middle. So what did you make of the decisions he made in light of the absences we had?
Yeah, tough one. When you don't win, what happens before kickoff has a more magnifying glass on it, shall we say. And when the Trossard stuff breaks the night before, you just know these rumours are never wrong, didn't you? When the right people send them, we all know it's going to end up in not being there. It's like flipping hell. So now we can't do what we did on Wednesday, because Wednesday against PSV was actually quite nice. Regardless of the opposition, there's some really good balance and movement there. And I thought it was really, really good. So now we get into the mode where we're going to have to make a decision. Now, if we're making a decision as fans, without knowing the game plan, my team would have been slightly different. I'd have just said, okay, who's the next man up if Trossard's out? I would have said, well, Vieira's playing quite well. I'd have moved him out to the wide, and I'd have kept the team very similar because I really liked the team. We all said we should play the same team in the weekend. So that's what I would have done. Some people would have done Nelson, some people would have done Smith Rowe. It's all the same. It's just, that's what I would have done. And then you see, when the team announced and I'm doing my pre-stuff for you, Elliot, I thought, okay, what are we doing now then? We got Saka, Nketiah, Jesus up front. We're going to press them. That's what I thought. We're going to play in their half. They're going to play out. We're going to press them. Those three are pretty good pressers alongside Odegaard. I thought, let's go 4 against your lot. Let's see what we got. And I just saw something come out of StatsBomb just this morning. So Nketiah had 32 first half high pressures. Bingo, it's working. Odegaard 31. It's working, right? So what didn't work is that the ball didn't end up in the onion bag from those high pressures. And some of those ricochets ended up going not where we wanted them to go. Do you know what I mean? Someone went out to play, but you could see the plan. So beyond what I wanted to pick, which I've already explained, he picked a team for a game plan. But then during the course of the game plan changed, the personnel changed, they adapted, we didn't quite adapt, but we made obvious mistakes. It's a difficult game to analyse from a fan perspective around feelings and emotions, but it's not a difficult game to analyse based on events because the events were clear. Do you see what I mean? But those events take you somewhere. I think that's the real interesting piece. Where do the events that don't go our way take you as an Arsenal fan, and where does it take you in your perspective of the team we have today and how we're playing and operating?
Yeah, we can come on to how individuals performed in the roles they were given a little bit down the road. So I do actually have a big problem with event-based analysis of football in general, because I think that it elides the issues that get you where you're going, right? I mean, a team can play terribly and win 1-0. Like, the fact that Fulham got a 2-2 at Arsenal doesn't mean Fulham played well, because Fulham did not play well, right? Anything can happen in a football match because it's low scoring. And I have seen it said by people like, if Jesus just puts away his easy chance, and, I have a slightly different thought on whether that's an easy chance, but okay, if it's a good chance, then we're 2-0 and we go on to win it. Okay. I mean, if Eddie scores his chance and Jesus scores the one that Vicario saves, it's 4-0 at halftime. You know what I mean? If Raya doesn't save their huge chance from Brennan Johnson, maybe they go on to win it. Event-based analysis doesn't work for me, because what matters is the flow of the game, the dominance in the game, the creation of chances, because ultimately the team that plays better, longer, consistently tends to be the team that goes on to get more good results. And I don't think this was a well-played football match. And so I think focusing entirely on the events, of course, turned the match. But I couldn't come away from that game saying I feel good about how we played. Now, the one thing I'll say, and Clive, I know you want to jump back in, so before we go over to you, Tim, if you're okay with that, I'll just let Clive come back for a second. Clive?
Go to Tim. I was going to say, I was just going to say, the events are the events, and your points are valid, Elliot, but look at your Twitter timeline. Don't tell me they don't matter, because they do matter. They leave an impression on
they're
people.
Huge.
Yeah, they leave an impression on people, how they analyze performances, last thing they remember. We walked out of that ground and we didn't really do that much in the last 10 or 15. And we all have a different view about what that really means. But that's the last event, remember. And it does colour your mind. It does.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're all human. We're human. Right? It colours your mind. Let's put our hands up. And, I tend to do this in 3 phases. We do the instant reaction, which is all instant. We do we do this podcast the day after, and I think it's more perspective. And then I breathe a little bit more, and we do our rewatch, and I go, okay, let's go. Let's do some analysis. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And they're the 3 phases that I normally go through. So I'm in perspective mode today, so beware, my son.
No, I like that. I think, and by the way, it would be silly to say the incidents don't matter. You know what I think it is? I think there are some games where the incidents are everything. And I just, look, if Jorginho can just trap a ball and pass it, we probably go on to win the game. And I don't even know if we really deserved that. Not that they deserved anything. I just think it was a low-quality football match. But it reminds me of, the Emery era. We had that long unbeaten run. The events were going for us, but the football wasn't good enough. And everybody could see it, but we kind of wrote it off. Well, what eventually happened? The fact that the football wasn't good enough caught up with us. For the record, I am not saying that's where we are now, not remotely. What I'm saying is, I think we're seeing in the league, at least we've seen some consistent issues in executing in the final third. There was sloppiness in this game. And so while the events turned the game, the performance for me, Tim, was a bit challenged. And I do see the selection as being a contributing factor in that. I mean, the one thing that we could agree on is that the first 30 minutes were quite good, that our press was working, that we did have them under the cosh, that we did create some openings. There was the Eddie chance that I mentioned. There was the one from Jesus that Vicario saves well. There were moves that were really encouraging. It looked more like Arsenal football. So for at least in that period, whatever the plan was, I think we're executing it, even if we weren't our absolute crispest best,
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we'll all... I think everyone feels quite disappointed. I definitely feel that. And when that happens, maybe you bring your baggage out, all of the stuff that's been gnawing away at you in the back of your head, it all comes out
really well
at times
said.
like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't have an enormous problem with the team selection, but then I tend not to in the days of 5 substitutes, because I think the one of the things I learned most from the whole Wenger era was like the last 15, 20 minutes is a different game, particularly if it's going to be tight and there's a good chance you're going to be level or there's going to be a goal in it. The last 20 minutes is a different game. And when we played Man United, we handled that aspect brilliantly. Both times we played United at home this calendar year, we recognised that the last 20 minutes are where you win these games, and we went for it and we stamped on them, and we deserved to get late winners in those games. So my disappointment is more in how we finished this game. And I think the manager, and we'll get into this later, I think the manager made some decisions which cost us the chance to really try and win it in the last 20 minutes. You're right, the events are the events. Like with Jorginho, he hasn't played any football this season. Next weekend, he won't make that mistake because he'll play it on Wednesday against Brentford. He'll probably get 90 minutes and he'll play against Bournemouth probably because of injuries, and he will not make that mistake. That was an error that he made because he's a bit rusty at the moment, and that's just the way it went, because things have gone against us a little bit. Injuries gone against us, not just before the game but in game as well. We lose a big player at half time. I think I kind of think the left 8 and the striker Arteta sees as a pair. I think when Jesus is through the centre, he wants Havertz there, but when Nketiah is there, he wants Vieira there, more of a combining player, and he had to change both of those at half time. And so, and look, I still have my niggling doubts about why we kept Nelson and Smith Rowe if we clearly quite far down the pecking order. But I can take or leave all of that, to be honest. And I think there's no reason we couldn't have won the game with those players. I just think for me, my problem is the last 20 minutes, and by that I mean 80 minutes onwards, because it's a 10-minute injury time game now, so it's a longer game. So that stretch at the end is even more important now because it's longer than it used to be, and I think that's where I have a problem with this game, with the way it was managed. Other things, I think events in the game went against us. I think Clive made a really good point on the instant reaction about when Raya made that save at 1-0 and Tottenham were getting on top. Someone go down. Someone sit your arse on the turf, get the physio on, get the game stopped, regroup, do that. And those are little details that maybe we're missing, maybe because we're still a bit young.
Tim, remember when, I'm just on top of that, Tim, remember last year when we'd score a goal, we'd all go into our huddle for a bit and have a little talk? Have you noticed that's not happening so much now?
Yeah, it was Xhaka-led, wasn't it?
Yeah, mate. Yeah. Little pauses to just grab ourselves, control ourselves a little bit, remind ourselves of the task ahead. I mean, we're talking minute details here. Lads, we do this for fun, right? But we're 1 point off where we were last year, so the world's not ended. So let's get perspective. But these are little things that we are not doing as we did last year.
I do wonder if the sense of sort of frustration and disappointment. I mean, look, you're always going to be frustrated and disappointed when you don't beat your hated rival at home, when you feel you are much better than them and you had 2 leads over them. I mean, the irony is I'm going to spend a decent amount of time on this podcast talking about issues with the attack, which I still think the irony is, Clive, you made fun of me on your instant reaction segment after the PSV game. Elliot, you still think we haven't clicked. We still haven't clicked in the Premier League in attack. And I think it's enough games in now that it concerns me a bit. But I think the reason that the frustration is intensified today is we look at the injury list piling up, and I think there's just worry. There's worry where this is headed, right? Not because we've had 2 draws. Obviously, anytime you don't win, it's frustrating. But it's the two draws allied to the fact that we now have to try to make it through a period potentially without Rice and without Partey and without Trossard and without Martinelli and potentially even without Saka. And it's starting to feel like the options are getting more limited. Clive, in the opening period where we were quite good, the game, it wasn't a flow-based game. You often talk about, our flow-based football. I don't think we ever really got into our flow in this game, but we were able to disrupt theirs, and we're able to create opportunities, out of that. Like Martin Odegaard had an uncharacteristically sloppy game, for example. I think he completed about 60% of his passes in this game, which is not how Odegaard operates. And there were obviously a lot of fouls, which you expect to see. There were cards. I think Odegaard got a card for showing an imaginary card, again, showing that, protecting players is on par or slightly less important than protecting referees. So be it. But we did fashion some openings. There was the Jesus chance I mentioned. There was the Eddie chance. And then after Saka scores, it's good fortune to score. The one that everybody's really fixated on is the Jesus moment. He does brilliantly to rob Maddison. I think this is one of the reasons I'd have Jesus in the center. You mentioned our pressing game. I thought our pressing game was not as effective as it is when Jesus is in the center of it. He is, I think, one of the best pressing, counter-pressing forwards in all of football. And when he does it from the middle, I think he's much more effective there. And he does it from the middle against Maddison in that moment, and he gets the ball and he shoots over. How big a moment is? Do you think the game turned on that moment? I can't decide if that's just narrative or not, but certainly that seemed to be the end of our kind of dominant period of the game. So how do you analyze that moment in particular?
So I think the pressing, again, I didn't pick the team. I'm just trying to explain the team, why it was picked, because I wouldn't have done it. And I think they were pressing as a collective four, right? So like most pressing schemes, it's not one person, is it, Elliot, as you know? There are many people out there that have said maybe Jesus could play off the right and be Saka's guy, and then we can do certain things in centre forward. Well, after the PSV game, mate, I wouldn't move him again. That's just my feeling. I wouldn't move him again, and that's it. You are our centre forward. Let's stop pretending you're a wide man. If other people can't do the job, you know my feelings here. Not in the big games. There are other games, and then there's the big 6 games. And in the big 6 games, you get your main man, the one that's won the most trophies, one of your top players. You get him in his best position. You don't have him carrying luggage for other people. That's not what you do, right? So for me, the turning point of the game, probably a couple, if you want to look back with retrospect, is the missed chance. The chance to go 2 up. We can now bring it to that event, but we needed the 2 goals for the game plan we were playing. We wanted to be really aggressive, energetic, get our goals. Against Manchester United, Spurs conceded 14 shots in the first half. Let's get them early while they're still going through their pattern play, while they're still looking at their whiteboard and where to pass and doing what. Let's get them. Let's affect their confidence. Let's go 2 goals up and see what happens. We didn't get a second goal. We were a bit disappointed by that. Again, we're such an emotional team and crowd at the moment. And then they get the chance where Raya makes the save. And I swear from that moment, Tottenham's belief grew. It grew at the same time as our confidence just dissipated by 5-10%. When you miss a big chance, you know what's coming. You know what I mean, Tim? You know what's coming up the other end. You miss a big chance, you know what's coming. They're going to score soon. It's just the nature of football. It's a beast we all know. We can't control it. And we got away with one. And then we didn't. That's the moment you got to realize it, And then they score, and they deserved to score. They had a 5-minute purple patch, and they were quite sharp. They were sharp. They were making overlaps. You have to give credit to them. I know people are not going to like it, but they're getting free kicks, putting the ball down, taking them quick, dropping off, going around the other side. They're playing football. This isn't the Spurs we're used to seeing, who turn up from just scared out of their boots, hoping to get a 1-1 and nick a goal, and then get a 1-1. This is not the Spurs we're used to seeing. This is a team that played us on our merits, and we should have beaten them, but we didn't. Right? So I think the goal did mean, so the missed chance did mean something, but it missed something for me because we could see they were playing. So it means more. We miss a chance against PSV where you know you're better. It doesn't mean as much. you talk about clicking in attack, Elliot. There's good data out there. Matchday did a good job last night. Our shot conversion rate is 12%, 8th in the league. Expected goals, 8th in the league. Big chance missed. We've missed 8, which is equal 9th in the league. Big chances scored, 5, 8th in the league. Big chances created, we're 12th in the league.
12th.
We're
almost 40 behind leaders Liverpool. We're 37 big chances created behind Liverpool, 34 behind City. I mean, this isn't minor stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
So where we have improved for me is the goals against. However, no one's creating anything special against us, are they? I mean, we've been tremendous in open play if you take out the absolutely unforgettable stupidity. You know, and that's where we've been. You know, just think about the Fulham first goal. Think about the Fulham both goals, to be honest. Think about the goals in this game. We're definitely one, obviously. This is the difference. This is the small difference. And I have this thing, and lads, maybe, sorry, Elliot, for going on a little bit, but I'm wondering.
No, go, please.
I'm wondering, and Tim, I really need you to slap me here and see if I'm talking sense. I'm wondering if the lessons learned meeting from last year has caused us to maybe slightly overcompensate for the things that were happening in the last third of the season. We were conceding goals. We focused on the second ball. We focused on the bits and pieces. We focused on trying to not force the play in attack, slower attacks, create less turnovers. And it's maybe not been as exciting, but over a longer period, it could be more efficient. But that efficient is being challenged by injury to key people and stupidity on unbelievable mistakes. And I'm not criticizing the play people who have done it. Mistakes in front of goal and mistakes in front of our goal. I think we're not seeing the true Arsenal because of those issues which are event-based and obvious. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Look, we are, so far this season, the story of our season for me is self-inflicted wounds. Now, look, the story of our season is we won the Community Shield, went on to start the season, undefeated through 6 games with 2 draws. One is a bad draw, one is a meh draw, and a 4-0 win in the Champions League. So I'm not saying it's been a dreadful start, but it's self-inflicted wounds. I mean, the goal we concede to Fulham to open that game, totally self-inflicted. The goal we concede to let Spurs get something out of this game, totally self-inflicted. And I actually think that the lineup and some of the substitutions were self-inflicted wounds. And look, sometimes you can overdo it with analysis. Guys, football can be very... Look, you want to go on Twitter and read a 47-tweet Tactico thread? Be my guest. Sometimes it's 11 players on one side, play 11 players on the other side, and the better players win. Take every manager out of every team in the Premier League. Okay, no managers, just players. Who wins the Premier League every season? Manchester City. You know why? They have the best players. You know who I think has the second best players in the Premier League this season? Arsenal Football Club. Maybe the first best. But when you take out Rice, and you take out Partey, and you take out Trossard, and you take out Martinelli, and you take out Timber, and you end the game without Bukayo Saka, now it's a lot closer. You're evening that level. Now, I think we helped even that level because I think we took one of our edges, which is this dynamic, disruptive center forward who misses some big chances, I know, but who recovers the ball with tremendous intensity, dribbles past defenders in a way that others don't, who knows how to connect in the middle of the park. Look at the goal he creates against PSV where he touches it around a player in the middle, right? Our half, turns, runs, distributes. We took that player and we put him out wide, and instead we put a player in the middle who had 22 touches in the game, completed 6 passes in the entire game. It's not a knock on that player. It's that we took a player who I think is a unique strong suit of ours and moved him out into the margins. And we used a player who A, is not a particularly effective presser, but B, is a low touch, low involvement player. And we lost that connectivity. I think it affected Odegaard. That's just my personal feeling, although I think the whole right-sided pod did not click as well. But Martin Odegaard, where's he going to go? We know that Spurs are going to want to try to keep us from funneling things down our effective right-hand side. So maybe they don't have to track in the middle as much because there isn't that focal point with the player who played 6 passes in the game, completed 6 passes. And so I think we made life harder, and I still just can't get past the idea that when you've got that special, unique player that you can play through the middle, and you've just given a contract to a player who's given you one of your highest moments of last season, by the way, against Bournemouth, who is a good player, who has talent, who is a natural left-sided forward, that you just don't go next man up. And I think it was a mistake. And it's one thing to do it from the start. I get it. Eddie has started a lot of games. Maybe you just wanted to go with more experience because the derby is so pressurized emotionally. But I think to not change it and to persist with it when it felt like, look, I had a lot of people say to me, this is the worst game I've seen Eddie play. I'm an Eddie booster, and I felt it was a poor game for him. You can really rate the player and think the selection was fine. But I thought this was one of those days where it looked like it wasn't happening for him. And nothing would have summarized this game that he was having more for me than if after all of the game of struggling to be involved and struggling to run to the spots and struggling to be switched on, he got a red card for running really hard into the keeper. That would have been like the crowning moment, because I thought that was a really, really close call. If it had been red, I think I would have been annoyed, but I don't think I could have been outraged. The thing that does happen, and Tim, I think the reason we wind up with so much event-based analysis is because of Clive dropping the great stats. I remember when Mikel first came, we had a lot of pods where we were like, if he just scores this one chance, we win. And you know why? When you don't create a lot of big chances, the one you do create becomes the talking point. That stat where we're 37 big chances created behind City, where we're 40 or whatever, 37 behind Liverpool and 35 behind City, that means that you're going to have fewer of those big moments to turn games, and you're going to wind up dissecting them more. Whereas, the play itself has to generate more of those big chances. So I think for me, what was really tough is after that period where they do get level, the game drifted a bit. And let's just quickly talk about the goal they get to equalize, because I watched it back, Tim, and there's a lot of walking, and I don't know if these players are just really tired. They didn't look physically at it. Maybe Wednesday took more out of them than we think. We always talk about, the best players play 55 games a season. You don't have to rotate. It felt like there was fatigue there. And if you look at that goal, there's a lot of walking. Saka gets beaten way too easily. I think White doesn't really cover himself in glory with the speed he can. I think we know he's got the speed he could use to get in front of Maddison, make it harder, and then just slow reactions from the center backs. It was a very strange goal to concede in how easy it was. And, oh, by the way, there's a bit of a Raya flap in there if you want to bring that up. What's your analysis of that goal? Because it just felt like we were one speed too slow across the pitch.
Yeah, definitely. We'd kind of, whether it was Spurs forcing us into it, we'd kind of called off the dogs a little bit on the press. And it could have been that the game plan was do that for the 30 minutes and then drop back a little bit, and maybe dropping back suited Spurs. Maybe it was just Spurs got more into the game and forced us back. I'm not really sure which way round. I think you're right in that they looked a bit tired. Obviously, they started the game in a very high-octane way. They've played on Wednesday night as well. And, I guess another one of the things, just talking about things that maybe went against Arsenal. And again, I think this is within the framework of your point that we're not creating enough so that the little things matter more. But even when I looked at Spurs last week getting that result, like getting those 2 injury time goals, and you think, they're flying into this game. They're absolutely flying. They're all in love with the manager. The media's in love with the manager. The media's in love with the team. I've listened to some general football podcasts this morning. They're like, what a result for Spurs. This was amazing and all of that. And look, yeah, they were good. And clearly, they've gone up several levels compared to, the misery fest they endured under Conte last season. But, they're a bit high on life at the moment. And like Clive said before the game, they kind of couldn't lose here because they had to approach the game the way that they did. I was never of the school that, if they come after us, we're just going to do to them what we did to PSV. Completely different level of team, completely different level. PSV lost their best player to Nottingham Forest on deadline day. It's not a comparison at all. Because I watched Tottenham hide in both North London derbies last season. Loved it. absolutely loved it. We tore them apart in both games and beat them very comfortably both times. I would have preferred that Tottenham to turn up. I was never of the opinion that, if they come and play, we'll smash them. Like, we could have, but I didn't really think that was likely. But yeah, I think there was a little bit of tiredness, a little bit of sloppiness. Again, that's what I mean earlier. Like, someone sit your arse down on the pitch, get the physio on, get the game stopped. I heard a stat Adrian Clark read it out on the Totally Football show this morning that this was one of the lowest in-play games of the season in terms of ball in play. Only Newcastle v Brentford had a lower ball in play. And you know what Newcastle and Brentford are like? Like,
yeah.
Brentford play for corners and Newcastle are the biggest time wasting team in the league. So
that's really interesting.
That is really interesting.
Does that explain why? Because the game felt weirdly dead for a derby, and that could help explain it, you know?
Yeah. And like, Tottenham did us on possession, but I do also think they were quite clever about interrupting our flow. I also think, like I say, the injuries that we had both before the game and during the game kind of helped make it a very, very bitty game. And I think the manager made some peculiar decisions in the last kind of 20 minutes that contributed to that as well. And overall, yeah, it was sloppy, but those moments happen in games. And when you're playing a team like Tottenham, you're not going to, unless they're playing cowardly Conte ball, you're not going to have the whole 90 minutes. You're going to have 10, 15 minutes when you're on the back foot. And it's about how you manage that. And that's why someone has to sit their arse on the turf. Someone has to understand the way the game's going, get the physio on, get people over to the sideline, you know, like, and just be a little bit grown up about things. I think also, as well as the kind of tactical side, team selection, substitutions, blah, 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 like, Arteta said it himself, we didn't really handle the emotion of this game particularly well. We let ourselves become, you know, fall into a bit of self-pity around both goals, I think. And I think we took too long to sort ourselves out around those moments.
Yeah, and ultimately, look, I can absolutely stomach, not enjoy, not like, but stomach, dropping points to a team that I feel has come and played us well. I said on the instant reaction, when we went to the Etihad and got blown away last season, I didn't even have the energy to be angry about it. They were just better than us. And we got a footballing lesson taught to us, and that happens sometimes. You know, I remember when Liverpool was in their pomp, there'd be games where they would come and absolutely strangle the life out of you. Like, watching it, you felt like you couldn't breathe. You know, and sometimes you just have to tip your hat. I think these are the games I struggle with the most, where I'm like, they weren't any good. Come on. Does anyone think they played well, that they were good? The game turned on a couple of moments when we don't take advantage of the hated enemy that comes to the Emirates and looks mediocre, when the wind is at their back and the media is just dying to fall in love with them, and they come and they look that mediocre. The frustration for me is that it felt so self-inflicted, and that it could have been a better day if we were just honoring him. I mean, you look at like some of the pass completion among our front line. Nobody beats, I think, 72%. As I mentioned, Odegaard was at 60%. We just were sloppy, Clive. And that's something that I think, you know, is a little hard to explain. Do you think fatigue played a role in this game? Because I do think after 30 or 40 minutes, we did not look the same. And I don't think it can just be explained away by emotion. One thing that I thought was a little bit interesting, let's talk about this just for a second, okay? Just for a second. David Raya. The media is going to make a big thing of the Raya Ramsdale thing. We can annoy us. We can hate the way they do it. We can think it's not classy, but they're going to do it. Mikel had to know they would do it. They're going to do it. We made the decision to go get this player because we felt that Ramsdale was an upgrade opportunity. And by the way, I'm not sure I disagree with that. But I thought this was an interesting Raya game because he had the one flashy save. I think it's a good save, a really, really good save. But he does flap a bit for the one where they score. And the thing that I thought stood out to me is he did the thing we've kind of been critical of Ramsdale for. He started going long a lot. He went long 19 times. He completed just 9 of them, 47%. Those are 10 possessions that came right back at us, you know, when I think we need to get our foot on the ball, right, and control the game. So where do you stand on sort of that performance and maybe the state of that situation? Because the media have definitely decided they're going to make it a thing, and I don't think we can really argue with that, you know?
There's a big question in there, and I think it's an interesting one. So I think Raya was a victim of being really, really good in the previous games, and they worked out that on his right foot facing out to the right, we better stop him doing that because Arsenal love building up on the right-hand side. So let's curve our runs and get him onto his weak foot. Makes a lot of sense. If someone's on his weak foot striking continuously, he's not going to be as accurate, is he? Not going to be as accurate. If you take away some of his targets, in Havertz, for example, and Jesus, then suddenly we're not going to retain the ball. Right? So that's a tick to the opposition. Right? So if I take it back and up on 30,000 feet, if you're looking at this season, there's a number of things that's happening. The expectation has grown on us to the point where only first or second will do. Right, so you've created a very narrow success criteria where a drop points to Fulham really become massive because of what things are happening around us. There's a league table out this today for the 2023, and we've got 55 points in that table, the same as Liverpool. So while we're focused on City, we're not realising that other people are building and growing too. Right, so the next narrative will be, are Arsenal the closest challengers to City? Well, hold on, can we just focus on football? Can we focus on what's happening? And there's a couple steps that have been taken in the squad rebuilding by the manager, which can be seen as forward steps, backward steps, or sideways steps, to be confirmed. What's happened with the goalkeepers is one of those steps. People don't understand it. When they don't understand it, it becomes a debate point, it becomes a distraction for the club, and takes away the serenity that we had last year where expectations were zero. We did something in midfield. We took out a 7-year guy, put in a 24-year-old who's a difficult person to pin what his best position is, into a position which is a difficult one for us to discuss what that position really, really looks like. Recipe for disaster. If you keep adding his price tag and his wages and the club he's come from, well, real recipe for distraction and disaster. Do you see what I mean? So we brought someone else in Timber who we haven't seen. Right, so we're now in a situation where people are actually asking, are we stronger than last season? Is there more clarity about what we're doing compared to last season, where we only remember the first part of the season where we were flying and don't remember from Anfield when we went through 2-2 and what our points have actually been? We've been a bit clunky for quite a while. But while we've been clunky, there have been some improvements and there is some assimilation. And I said, when I saw the fixtures come out, I sent out a tweet saying, this is a sneaky hard start. I actually expect this to get a little bit worse. I do.
Great.
And but I do think when we get this right, we turn the corner, I think we'll be better. Because some of the things that I am seeing there is sustainable, and things that I'm not seeing are explainable and personnel related. The way we're playing yesterday, I'm drifting a bit, Elliot, sorry. But the way we're playing yesterday, for me, that's personnel. The lack of central progression, that's personnel. I won't say that on Wednesday. Forget the opposition. We could see everything, right? And the goalkeeper thing, we're being set up. And this is the thing, we are being set up as fans. We're being set up to attack our own club based on criteria that's been set by some of the people out there and around us looking at us with the expectations that's growing. We're being set up. £72 million Pepe is now £65 million Havertz. We're being set up. Why are they spending money on the goalkeeper? Could spend it on a centre forward. And now Ivan Toney's trending in my life. Do you know what I mean? We're being set up. And we just need to breathe and relax and look at what. One thing that worries me is injuries and overburdening certain players. That's what worries me. Because the next game we can come out and smash someone, we all feel good again. But the injury situation is a concern because we carry that.
Yeah.
We don't want to carry that into Man City because we will not get away with it.
I'm sorry. Football is first and foremost about putting the best team on the pitch. All the other stuff matters at the margins, but if you don't have the talent, you got nothing. And we are a very, very, very good squad, as evidenced by the fact that we've been able to put good teams out even with with mounting absences. But there is a breaking point. And I think that's why people are more worried today than they might normally be from a draw. I'm going to give one, not counter. Well, I'm going to give a small counterpoint to what you've said there, just a small one, which is Arsenal Football Club is a very special club, very special place. This is a special community. Always said it. You know what? The rules still apply to us the way they do to everyone else. At some point, you have to win football games, you have to win trophies, and you have to stack them up in the trophy cabinet. Fans are eventually going to have expectations, and it's okay. Right? Last season was a surprise, and that's what made it so fun. We had an amazing season before the expectations for it had developed. But at some point, the expectations were going to catch up to our quality. And I am okay with people having those expectations and wanting to see something special from the club. And as a result of that, disappointment will be greater when results aren't what people want, right? Last season was a bit of a fairy tale. And it's one of the reasons a lot of people, yourself included, Clive, said it was one of the favorite seasons ever. But I think it was a confluence of circumstances that are not going to be easily repeated. You know, when the Invincibles went unbeaten, it was one of the greatest things that's ever been done in football and one of the greatest seasons in the history of our club, if not the greatest. But the reason Arsene Wenger said it can be done is because he knew he had the team to do it. You know, it wasn't a total surprise. This team, I think, when fit, is built to go toe-to-toe with Manchester City to the extent that anybody can. And so I can understand people wanting to see more. I also think when you get good, you don't get to be Cinderella anymore. And so the media tear strips off you. And we're starting to see that. I want to get to the second half. I want to get to the loss of Declan Rice and obviously the Jorginho unfortunate error, some of the substitutions, because I think there are big questions around that. But just to finish on this, Tim, like, this is the problem. You're going to have, the margins are so fine in football. I think there are people that will look through the lens of this game and say, actually, everything's fine. We should have won it. We gifted them 2 chances, a couple self-inflicted wounds. Otherwise, we're winning this game. You know, if Jorginho doesn't do what he does, or Jesus, blah, 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 right? And then there are other people that are going to say, no. This is yet another game where we're chucking goals in at home and we're not looking like we're clicking at the other end. And there's probably truth to both, I guess. Let me ask you this. We'll do the big picture and then come back to the small picture a bit. With the narratives that are set up, right? The Raya thing or the Havertz thing, and you know the way, you know, we got the draw in this game. Does it feel precarious to you at the moment? Because I couldn't help coming out of this game feeling I've not been worried about Arsenal in a long time. Hardly. I mean, all of last season and this season, I've been like, we're really good. We play really good. We dominate the game. It's going to click. This is the first time with everything that happened in this game where I came away and I was like, those whiskers are starting to poke out a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, because look, there are issues. We can see there are issues, and it depends where you think those issues are. It might be that we're booting the ball in our own net, particularly at the Emirates. It might be so that we're not. Yeah, that we're like, because we're not doing that away from home. Like, all right, it's a small sample size, but Everton and Palace strangled them, didn't create a chance between them, controlled the game, didn't create a lot. And that actually really feels more like maybe closer to what Arteta wants in terms of like just strangling the life out of a game, controlling it. At the moment, we're not creating enough to win those games more than 1-0. Like we didn't create a huge amount in those games, but the opposition had nothing at all. Whereas at home, there's just something, I can't work out what it is. And look, this may be happening, but I really hope the staff are looking into their preparation for home games. That might not be the problem at all. But like I said, after the Fulham game, what time are people getting there? How are people getting there? What's happening in the like? These are the things you've got to look at. You've got to look at honestly and say, actually, can we change something here? Might not be a problem at all. Might be completely unrelated. But if you're honest, as a staff, you've got to look at that stuff. Same with injuries. We've got a lot of injuries at the moment. Why? Is that a coincidence? Is that just unlucky? Because, again, I could be doing that thing where I'm connecting unconnected things in my head, but I see Saka, like, barely able to walk and move to right back for the last, 10 minutes of this game, begging to come off and being kept on. And then I'm looking at, Martinelli did his hamstring, Trossard's done his hamstring, Rice has done his back, all right, Partey's done his calf. When like, what else is new? But you know what I mean? It's like we're getting a lot of soft tissue injuries, and your boy on the right wing can't walk, and you're keeping him on. And so, you know, there's all of this kind of behind it, and there are all these kind of issues that are coming to the surface. I agree with you, Elliot. It's the first time I felt like that as well. I've said on this podcast a few times this season, I think there's just been a bit too much feverishness, a little bit too much hysteria. But this is the first time I came out of the ground and thought, no, actually, I'm on the same page as everyone else here. And I do think Clive makes a really good point about, you know, let's not name them, but certain outlets that charge quite a lot of money for subscriptions, like shit posting on the internet again. And like, why the hell are they having a massive conversation about Aaron Ramsdale on Sky Sports after the game? It's been 3 games. It's not a subject anymore. Like, it's happened. The decision's been taken. It's 3 games. It's done. Like, it was a discussion a week ago, but they keep bringing it up, and it's the same as the Havertz thing. So, I think that's more what kind of Clive was getting at. But yeah, like we can all see that there are issues. I hope that this is what we talked about in the summer, because we all talked about it in pre-season, didn't we? We all talked about the fact we didn't think we were going to fly into this season like we did last season, but that would be okay if we're doing a bit like what Man City did last year, where Man City didn't look great this time last year, but they worked it out. And that's kind of what we've got to do. But at the same time, there's no guarantee that just because you start a little bit below where you were last, like, I think if we fly into this season again, almost certainly we run out of juice. Almost certainly that happens. But just because we haven't done that, it doesn't mean it's not a given that we are going to gradually sort all of this out. So I don't think it's wrong to be anxious about that at all. And look, Arteta's kind of telling you himself when he's not picking Havertz for the derby that he doesn't think, like I said, I do think it was mainly to do with the central striker, but he didn't believe in Havertz enough to just put Jesus up front, Havertz in that position. I've been high on Eddie this year, but I'm sorry, I don't think he's so much better than Reece Nelson and Emile Smith-Rowe that we should be messing around like that. But like I say, that's kind of fine. I can live with that. It's more the last 20 minutes when he took Jesus off, he left Saka on when he couldn't walk. That, to me, killed our chance to win this game. And I think the coach has to be honest that he cost the team the chance to win this game by doing that.
Yeah. We can get deeper into that too, because everybody has an off game. You know, I mean, look, Martin Odegaard is one of the best players in the league. He had a bit of an off game. I think Mikel had a bit of an off game. It's hard, right? Because nobody knows better than Mikel. Nobody on this podcast, nobody watching. He knows best. Doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes. I said this on the Instant Reaction. Pep Guardiola is the best manager in the last decade, without any question. And in some of the biggest games of his career, he's made some really strange calls and gotten it wrong. I've also seen him correct it in the middle of the game. And I think that there were opportunities to change this game differently. But I want to get to how the injury impacted that. Because the Jorginho thing, you know, there are going to be people who are listening to this whole thing saying, nah, you've overthought it. If Jorginho doesn't make that one mistake, we win the derby. And you're probably right. I don't think it changes that we weren't very good, but I think you're probably right. But let's do this. Let's talk about how we can stay healthy so that we don't pick up a calf or a hamstring or a back. And that's by drinking AG1. AG1 is health. It is health for energy, health for recovery, health for focus. Look, I drink AG1 because it helped my gut health issues. That was what I wanted from it. I wanted to feel better gut health. And with 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, adaptogens, probiotics, things like that, I felt that it was going to give me what I needed. I had a friend who was using it. They recommended that I try it. I tried it, and it did for me what I was looking for. But the other thing that it also did is it meant that I had like 2 different gummy vitamins I took every day. The first ingredient, both of them sugar. You don't need to be doing that. Got rid of those, replaced it all. I put it in water. I drink it, and it's how I start my day. It also helped me reduce my caffeine intake. You know, I still drink coffee. I love coffee, but I was drinking too much of it, just in my view. So I really like AG1, and I think that because it's developed by athletes with athletes in mind, it's great for recovery. The one other thing I wanted to say is also lifestyle, right? So it's keto friendly, vegan friendly, paleo friendly, all that stuff. So if that is complicating your choice of a supplement, then this makes it easy to choose. So if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/vision. That's drinkag1.com/vision. And once your body is healthy, it's time to get your business. Nope, that's wrong. Your business is fine. Forget your business. In fact, don't even think about a business. Don't even start one. What I was going to tell you is that this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp isn't online therapy. It's therapy. Okay? That's the thing. It is therapy. I can only say it this simply. One of the best decisions I ever made in life was to see a therapist to work on the things that I felt were holding me back. And I didn't go see a therapist in a crisis moment, although of course you can do that. I went to see a therapist at a time when I just felt like my sense of self and my sense of identity and where I wanted to be as a person was going a little bit off course. Too many thoughts in my head, needed to work on that. And you can probably tell just by listening to me on this podcast that I struggle with the thoughts in my head. You've got a partner, you've got a friend. Those things are important. It's great to have those in your life. But a therapist is a professional who helps you work on your thoughts. And I think that this is a way to do that where you don't have to leave your home. You don't have to, make a commute to get there. You don't have to worry about finding the time to go out and do it. You don't necessarily have to be like, well, I don't feel comfortable sitting in the office and in the waiting room. You don't have to do any of that. So, I think if you want to try working on mental health, which is just health, right? It's just part of your body, an important part of your body, then this is how you can do it. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/vision today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/vision. Do it now. Clive, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Good dramatic pause there. Now, Clive, with our last 30 minutes or so of this podcast, what I want to do is I want to talk about some of the stuff that happened second half and think big picture about where we are at this point. The derby is always a good chance to kind of sum things up. But I did sort of wonder, sometimes you see a change that feels obvious. To me, the obvious change, I think, was to remove Eddie Nketiah and move Jesus central, maybe bring on Nelson or something. But the problem with making that change is he was forced to remove Rice. And the decision to remove Rice was combined with the decision to remove Vieira and bring in Kai Havertz. Now, he said that was a tactical decision, but I wonder if that tactical decision is connected to the removal of Rice, in that Rice was very physical. I think he was handling Maddison pretty well. He was patrolling that area pretty well. Jorginho obviously has less mobility. Havertz, where I think he has a big advantage over Vieira, is he's good at ball recoveries. He's a little more combative. He's a little more robust. And even though he's maybe not necessarily the most comfortable midfielder, I do think he does pretty well off the ball in those areas. So firstly, do you think that those two changes were related to one another? And also, players are human. When Declan Rice is out there covering every blade of grass, I think it gives you a confidence level. What do you think it does to see Rice not able to come out in the second half, for the fans, for the players, and how that double switch changed the dynamic of the derby?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one today because we ended the game with a really quite a weak side, and if we drew this game with our top boys all out there fit and available, Martinelli, flying down the wing, if we'd have gone Partey and Rice in midfield, they're not getting through us. Do you know what I mean? If we had everybody in place, and then we bring in Trossard off the bench, etc., so this isn't a true game. I saw a good tweet from someone this morning. He sort of said, Tottenham's ceiling is our floor. And I thought, you know what? This wasn't the best of Arsenal on this day, the third game in a week, and I do think the Wednesday game had an impact. But even then, Tim is massively frustrated with the last 20 minutes, because there was opportunity there to still get a little bit more out of that orange. Do you know what I mean? We didn't quite take it. And by the way, they didn't have anything left in their orange. They made some substitutions, which told me they didn't fancy losing. And that's when the North London derby takes over you. And what happens towards the end of the game, you get this feeling that, oh my gosh, we can't lose this. We can't lose this. We can't have a situation where basically they are dancing round our stadium after a win. And for those who have seen that although they've probably seen it after a draw. But those who have seen that, it is not something I want to see repeated in any which way or form. And so your behaviours do change. They do change. And so, yeah, to your point, I think we just ran out of options. And I think you're absolutely right. They were connected to changes. Again, I think Vieira's done well recently, and some people have written him off. Were now saying he should be playing. I think he should be playing in teams that are going to sit away in transition, second ball games where collisions are needed. And this is always going to be one of those. I'm not sure that's the game for him. I do think that. I think it's a day for people that can run, that can transition, that can stop people. Spurs are number one for progressive carries. Vieira's not a tackler, right? So have some people in there who can win duels. A misstep for me. Just a misstep. It's okay. Again, if we go back to the events, we score our goals, no one's talking about that, right? But for me, that was a misstep. And in hindsight, Vieira should have played against PSV and not against Spurs and swapped that around, and I'm sure we'd have done a little bit better. But we are forced into situations and decisions which we are not really clued up on, particularly around Jesus. So Elliot, I do think we're a hostage to this at the moment. I think we're a hostage to our ability to keep people on the pitch. We had 7 games in a 22-game stretch. We're 3 games in, and we're already creaking around the edges to the point where I'm thinking, mate, should we just chuck Wednesday? Because we need to get back on the bike for Bournemouth. And we need to go into City in some form of form and health. So should we just chuck Wednesday? Some people will say, you can't chuck Wednesday, we got to get a trophy. That's up to them. But we watched, it took Saka about 45 minutes to walk around that pitch yesterday after when he got substituted. And none of that tells me that he should be out there skipping around midweek, and a few others in the same position. So we need to make a decision, in my opinion, Elliot.
Yeah, Tim, that's one thing. I mean, nobody is perfect. I think it's fair to say. And you're just naturally going to have some questions around, certain decisions that are made. And if there's one thing about Mikel Arteta that I think has come up as a question, he's answered so many questions since he's arrived and proved himself to be such a fantastic manager. One question that I think has always sort of been there, though, is about rotation, substitution patterns, things like that. I mean, you mentioned it. We've got some soft tissue injuries, quite a few of them. Players are playing a lot of games. Everybody started the Champions League tie, and even me being as obnoxious and dogmatic as I can be about rotation, I sort of understand that, but you have to be willing to take the risks, right? If you play William Saliba in the Europa League, you have to be willing to take the risk that you lose William Saliba to an injury in the Europa League. And, the same goes with Champions League and all of these fixtures that we play. It's going to be, it's going to be debated why we pick up these injuries. But I actually think there's another point here, which is who you trust and who you bring on. Jorginho comes on and he makes a big error. It can happen. It can happen to anyone. Now, I can't prove that it wouldn't have happened otherwise, but Jorginho's a player he could have used against PSV, right? And given Declan Rice a day off, or, played Declan Rice for 50 minutes in that game and, and use Jorginho for the rest. In fact, that may have happened. I need to double check when the subs were made, because he did make quite a few subs in that game. But how do you feel sort of about like Jorginho in that position, right? Having to come on at 45 minutes in the derby, not having really had any playing time, and just the extent to which we do ask our primary players to play all the time. Do you think that factors into how we wind up in a situation like this?
I don't necessarily have the Saka one. That's where I've got a real bee in my bonnet, right? So I'm going to lead in with that, and it relates to this. Okay, so I generally speaking, I am on board with the best players play every 3 days and blah blah blah, etc. And I think there was a point where it was worth making that point to Saka. I was broadly supportive of it, broadly supportive of the idea of not letting him develop a victim complex about the treatment he gets and all of that. But I think we've gone past that point now. And when he's waving at the bench to tell you he's injured, listen to him. Listen to him. Like, don't not trust his diagnosis of his own body, particularly like there was an acknowledgement that he couldn't really contribute because he moved to right back. And it's one of those things where maybe if we'd been kicking the other way and it'd been closer to the dugout, I kind of think that a conversation would have happened and it'd have probably come off a lot sooner. And I've got a bee in my bonnet about it because it was on my side and I could see him. I could see he couldn't walk. And in another respect, we were lucky because if it was happening on the other side, I think Ange Postecoglou would have gone, oh my God, they've moved Saka to right back and he can't walk. Get down that side again and again and again. I don't think Tottenham was switched on to the fact that we were basically down to 10 men and we took the decision to move our injured player to right back. Like, that was a very dangerous and I think irresponsible thing to do with the player's health and with the game state. That's one of the reasons I'm annoyed about that last section of the game, because we were drawing and I wanted the final whistle to go. I was like, I take a draw. I didn't feel like that against Man United. I didn't feel like that against Fulham. Like, this game, I was like, oh my God, he's actually trying to win this with 10 and a half men. Like, this is going to blow up in our faces. And I was relieved at the final whistle. I don't want to feel relieved that we've drawn at the final whistle. I don't expect that every single time we need a goal, we'll get one. It didn't happen under Wenger. There were days where we got 1-1s, but we battered the opposition, battered them. Sometimes it didn't go in. Okay, that didn't happen this time. And a big part of the reason that didn't happen, he took off Jesus, and look, I kind of understand if he's managing Jesus's minutes, albeit I think that's a little bit overwrought. Like, he had a little tidy up surgery like 6 weeks ago. Like, he's not coming back from a massive injury, and that to me completely contradicts like leaving Saka on when he can't walk, basically. And I think those decisions really cost us the chance to go through the game. And to actually answer your question more broadly about injury management, I don't necessarily have an issue with rotation so much, because your best players, you are just going to play them all the time. That's just the way it goes. But the way we've managed situations, Jesus last season, we're told that knee injury didn't just happen at the World Cup. It didn't just happen to him in a game. He was carrying it. And if you look, I go on about this all the time. Last October, Arsenal played 9 games. They played at home to Forest on the 30th of October, the worst away team that has ever been in the Premier League. We started Jesus and not Nketiah. And it's kind of like, come on, and he definitely had that knee injury at that point. That's reckless. Declan Rice with the kind of, and I know James McNicholas has said he's been carrying a bit of a calf injury and all of that, and I get it. Players play with stuff all the time, but like at the same time, that doesn't mean you never have to play him and wait till he's totally pain-free, but manage it a little bit. I do think Arteta's got quite a lot to learn there. And look, maybe some of it is I've still got this image in my head of him pushing Thomas Partey back onto the pitch at White Hart Lane when he couldn't walk. Like that, I understand. I do understand. I'm broadly on the best players play all the time. The best players play with a bit of pain. But I think he's going too far the other way. I do. I think it cost us this game, and if it hasn't already, it's going to cost us big players, and I don't like it. And we've got a bigger squad now. We can manage those moments much, much better. And I don't think he's there yet.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those hard things because it requires you to both express some kind of expertise as medically, which we're not in a position to do, and then expertise as a manager, which we're not in a position to do. I can't pretend I know what the right amount of rotation is, what the right amount of substitution is, what the right amount of use of players is. And it may largely not matter at all. I mean, I think we looked leggy as the game wore on. Clive, the whole thing, though, I mean, you know how it is, right? There's a world where Saka scores his penalty. And by the way, Saka, who, whatever you want to say about the guy, like the big moments, he's just the man for the big moment. And he steps up, he takes the penalty in the derby, and he scores it brilliantly, right down the middle, but no problem. Cool as you like. And then we concede straight away. And I just think if we had consolidated there, maybe we we see ourselves able to start to find spaces that Spurs leave. We're able to hit them on the counter more because by the end of the game, we're not playing with our most controlling team. But, maybe we would have had an opportunity, but we give it right back. And I mean, people are going to kill Jorginho for that, and I understand it. It's just a terrible moment, and it can happen for a player who hasn't been playing much. We're going to need him now, potentially, if Rice misses even any time. So we can't abandon this player, but it's just a bad moment. You think if we somehow avoid that, it feels like it would be different. I mean, that's the whole game right there. And to get the lead and give it back so quickly, that was a heartbreaker,
Yeah, we never got to see the team with control for a long period, it felt. So, yeah, and I watched the goal again this morning, and Jorginho wants that ball. He has options, and he just changes his mind. Looks down at the ball, and suddenly Madison's smelling his aftershave, right? He's right there. So, and he takes it away, and they execute. So that moment hurt people. That I think it brought fear into us a little bit. Tim's overall point about managing the last few minutes, I think, is absolutely right. But I found myself looking towards the bench and thinking, oh crikey. I'm sure I said about a week and a half ago, look at our bench. It looks so strong. And then suddenly I'm looking at this bench, I'm thinking, okay.
Poof.
It's I'm seeing Cedric running up and down in front of me with his tracksuit bottoms off. This is not something I want to see. Right, and I've seen it twice in a week, and he's looking keen, right? So, and so that tells you where we are. And then he hasn't played for a long time. He's on the bench. It doesn't take much, right? It doesn't take much before you're showing your leg to the opposition. You're not quite there, So I did feel for him a little bit when it comes to finding that solution in the last 10 minutes, based on the fact that I was petrified, like Tim. I wanted the point.
It does seem to feel, guys, like I know we weren't great on the day, but doesn't it feel like every time we make a mistake, we pay the maximum penalty? And that, I get it, that's whining a little bit, like, oh, woe is us. But I mean, one giveaway against Fulham and a guy hits the ball wrong and it goes past Ramsdale, right? And we give the ball away here, and any number of things can happen, but they play it perfectly, and Son is clinical, and it just does feel like we are catching the maximum punishment. And then maybe at the other end, not doing that. And the center forward position is one that we're going to look at. I just don't think there's any way to get around it. And by the way, we lost Tim, but that's okay because we're down to our last 5 or 6 minutes or so. So, we'll look to see Tim another time. Clive, a lot of people right now saying, oh, Jesus, you got to finish your chance. You got to finish your chance. No one was saying that against United. No one was saying it against PSV. You know who leads the big chance missed table this season? Erling Haaland. You know who finished top of it last season? Erling Haaland. You know who finished at top of the season before that? Harry Kane. I mean, the best strikers miss a ton of big chances. You know why? They get so many. The goal is to get a ton of big chances, and big chances are 50-50s anyway most of the time. The idea that what he had was a tap-in is silly. It's not a tap-in. He should do better. I think the mistake is he should take a touch and score. But ultimately, as the game is wearing on, he's the one. I think Gabriel Jesus looked most likely, most lively, most engaged. He was one of our best players. The turning point for me in this game is sticking with Eddie Nketiah the whole way, taking Jesus off. I thought it was an odd choice. I accept that we may be managing Jesus's minutes, which is why what I would have liked to see, if he only had 75 minutes in him that Mikel could give him, I would have liked to have seen him shift to center forward earlier and maybe get Nelson on and give Jesus a run from the center for more of the game. I just think that position on this day, Clive, when we didn't have our A game, I think center forward was a bit of a missing position. And, I already referenced it. Obviously, Eddie got a close call with what I think was a borderline, orange card, but it just felt like we did not get enough in that position. I think Mikel, given another way to do it, might do it differently,
Yeah, the Eddie one, I explained it away by him pressing, and he did that for a while until he ran out of energy. I do feel there's an issue with Eddie since the England call-up. Since he's been called up for England, he's had 2 low games now. He had the 8-touch game, and he's had this game. And I'm watching him, and I'm seeing his body language change. He's not as free. Sometimes when he gets frustrated, remember he got sent off in the game when he came off the bench, he got sent off quite quickly with another reckless challenge. When he's frustrated himself, this is where he goes. And And I do think the manager was trying to keep him on the pitch because he could see he was dropping in confidence. He didn't want to hurt him. So again, some people are going to say he doesn't mind hurting Ramsdale, right? So, I get it, right? But each individual person is different, and he has to manage the group. On Jesus, after PSV, I don't want him ever to come out of the centre forward position because that's the best we've looked for me going as an attacking unit.
Yep.
And it's about the role and how you see it. And for me, it's a facilitation role to allow our 2-8s and our 2 wide men to attack from lane 4 and lane 5 and come into the area. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. And that person needs to be a bag of tricks connector or super physical and strong. But he has to be intelligent to understand the movement to other people, and he has to be selfless. He has to allow to make runs to allow other people to get spaces. And Eddie's a different type centre forward. He's not quite big enough to be a line leader consistently over a long period of time for a title chasing team. But he has the goal scoring abilities. He's like a slightly smaller Ollie Watkins in that respect, you know. But Ollie Watkins has defined his game slightly better. He runs the channels harder, so he become a channel runner. What they've done is give him a pacey forward in Diaby next to him. They can share the legs. They can share the movement in the front two. I think that's how Eddie would suit a team in the front two. For us, we ask them to do different things. And I do think it's about roles. That's how I see it. I see it as a facilitation role. You know, I see it like that. Other people say, no, why don't we just go and get someone like Haaland? And so it is that role. And I think he's struggling at the moment. And that position now suddenly is coming to light because when we don't win points, we start to get a rush of conclusions on people that we were giving people time before. We become conclusive when it comes to people when we drop points. I'm trying not to go there. However, I do think the minimum requirement for that role is your ability to allow us to get up the pitch, to hold, set, turn around, connect, control, work hard off the ball. That's the minimum requirement. At this moment in time, Eddie's not retaining the ball, and his press it ran out of energy yesterday, and he missed his one big chance, which strikers always get judged on. But I don't worry about him scoring. I've said it before. I don't care if he scores. I need him to facilitate the other 4 people in our front 5. That's number one requirement for him. And if the goals will come just on pure movement and energy, and because he does understand what to do. So yeah, we're not quite clicking in it. I'm going back on my clicking thing that you said to me last week. We're not quite clicking.
There you go.
And that role, I'm afraid, is a real debate, and people see it as the next step in our development before we really arrive as a football team.
I've seen Jesus play center forward a few short substitution appearances this season and then one start at PSV. And those are the times I think we looked most like ourselves. I just wish we had seen a bit more of that. You know, my take on Eddie Nketiah is basically that I think he's a player who is able to score goals at a pretty good clip. Unfortunately, I think the games where he doesn't score goals, the rest of his game maybe doesn't connect to the other players as much. And so you're playing him for his end product, and people say, well, that's what a striker does. But I think you sacrifice quite a bit in other things. And that, you know, may also lead to the issue of, you know, well, is Havertz doing what he needs to do? Well, Vieira didn't look very good in this game either. I think their job is to connect with the center forward, to run beyond, to make those late runs. And if the center forward has 6 completed passes in 90 minutes, you know, is that second man runner going to have a lot of impact? Probably not. I think it just starts to disrupt. All in all, the game kind of, you know, finished actually in a good place in the sense that we were dominant. They were bunkering. Yeah. We couldn't break the door down. I do tend to agree with Tim that it was very strange the way we left Saka on, you know, only to take him off with, you know, a minute to go and just stoppage time and give Emil that. The good news is that some of the early stuff on Declan Rice's injury is encouraging. Saka doesn't seem to be injured. I haven't heard anything about it. Trossard and Martinelli may be back quicker than we think. So I think this is a case of giving the League Cup a pass, you know, playing the kids and focusing on just being ready to put out the best team we can put out in the league. I think if we put out our strongest team every week in the Premier League, the strongest possible team, I still think we are very, very good. It was a frustrating day. And I think it is a Schrodinger's cat day, because I think if you're someone who wants to look and say, we had the lead twice and, you know, we didn't we didn't do enough to keep it, but we should have won that game, fine. I think if you're frustrated because you feel like it wasn't a good performance for us, fine. But either way, we haven't lost yet. There's nothing gone. And if we can keep the squad, in reasonable
Healthy.
shape, healthy, exactly. It's Bournemouth away next in the league, and then it's City. So we just got to try to bring the best team we can to City. And remember that City will be without Rodri for that game. So maybe a little bit of an opportunity there, and without Kevin De Bruyne. Let's leave it there. We've had some technical problems, so I think it makes sense to knock it on the head here, and we'll obviously have something every day this week, so there'll be plenty of stuff for you. Tim is on Twitter at Stillmanator and long gone. Clive is on Twitter at Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. We live in hope, and we live to fight another day, and as long as the injury news isn't so bad, I think we'll be okay. So we'll leave it there. We love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10. Brentford, no.